So after the restrictions, we were able to focus on the impact of alcohol on our children and their quality of life. We had heard about the fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and in 2008 developed a strategy to address fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And we called that the Marulu strategy. And Marulu, for those of you who may not know, it's a Bonobo language word meaning precious and worth nurturing. We invited the University of Sydney, the George Institute for Global Health, the University of Washington, and experts worldwide to partner with my organisation, Marninwarntikura, Women's Resource Centre, and Nulungu Cultural Health Services, to conduct assessments to help us understand the prevalence and the impacts of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and what it was or what it is that we were facing as a community. And at this point, I'll invite Liz, Professor Elizabeth Elliott, to explain to you a bit about FAST and what we did and what we found in the Lililwan study, which is what we labelled or called our research project, Lililwan, for the little ones. So thanks, Liz.
Thanks very much, June, and thank you again all for coming. And I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Now, surprisingly, many people don't know that when a pregnant woman drinks alcohol, that alcohol passes very rapidly across the placenta and into the circulation of the unborn baby. And alcohol can cause a range of problems. It can cause miscarriage and prematurity, low birth weight, a range of birth defects. But most importantly, alcohol can injure the developing brain and impair its function. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, which June mentioned and I'll call FASD, are a group of conditions that are characterised by brain injury that's caused by prenatal alcohol exposure. And if you have a look at this iceberg here, the tip of the iceberg is the children or adults who have physical features associated with their neurodevelopmental problems. They may have a funny looking face, they may have birth defects of the heart or the kidney, etc. They may be small. But there's under the water a really much larger number of children whose brains have been affected at a time in pregnancy, the second and third trimester, when they're not going to get the birth defects, but they are going to get brain injury. And these children are just as significantly impaired with a range of developmental and learning problems. So some children with FASD look normal, but they struggle with their development. FASD have lifelong implications, and yet these disorders are 100% preventable. When June's mother was recounting the introduction of alcohol into the stations on the Fitzroy Valley to us last week, in the early 1970s she was referring to, she recalled that at that time hardly any women drank. She did say, however, I noticed that some of the older women who were drinking had babies that were different. When the mother was drinking, some of their babies were very small. They looked different. The kid, when he was going big, had trouble listening, learning. And we think that this is perhaps one of the first recognitions of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders in the Broome region. As June mentioned, next one, after a long period of community consultation, a group of us embarked on Australia's first population-based prevalence study of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. These studies haven't been done elsewhere because they're quite difficult, expensive, time-consuming, and in this case, as you can imagine, quite logistically difficult to cover 45 remote communities through the Fitzroy Valley. We had discussed the potential benefits of this study and also the risks with the community, but the community decided they wanted to go ahead. They said unless we named the problem and provided the evidence that it existed, we would not achieve traction in our efforts to improve the diagnosis and management of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, to support parents and caregivers, and most importantly, to prevent this tragedy. All the work was conducted in the presence of community members with community knowledge, language and cultural skills, and we were very sensitive and respectful towards mothers and reinforced that this was not about blame or shame, because we wanted them to cooperate and provide information to us. So in 2010, we interviewed 97% of all caregivers of children in the age range 7 to 9 living in the Fitzroy Valley. And this very high participation rate reflects the fact that the community was well informed, that this was a study that had been prioritised and was being led by the community. And in this slide you'll see myself, Maureen Carter, June and Jane Latimer representing the University of Sydney, Lililwan Cultural Health Services, Marninwarntikura Women's Resource Centre and the George Institute for Global Health.